Is there ever a good time to clear out your garage? As far as I was concerned, no. The temperature was over 80 degrees, and my shirt was so soaked with sweat that it clung to my body like a second skin. Unfortunately, there was little time left. In a couple of weeks, I'll be back in class explaining the difference between a quarter note and a half note to the next generation of Mozarts. And if I don't get the garage in order, I'll have to leave the car in the driveway all winter. This wouldn't be a problem if we lived in Arizona, but in Chicago it wasn't much fun. It's amazing how much garbage two people can accumulate in just 6 years of marriage. No, that's not fair. A lot of what I was going through came before Julie and I became a couple. For example, I found Julie's old Dell laptop in one of the boxes. I knew it was the one she used in college, and it was old even then. I did some digging and found the charger, so I plugged it in to see if it would work. Nothing. I left it on while I continued cleaning and checked again a couple hours later. Still nothing. Since it wasn't mine, I knew better than to ask before just throwing it away, so I set it aside. Julie was amazed when she returned home from work. She entered and looked around. "Wow, you've been a busy little bee. Looks great, honey. Do you think we can fit both cars in here this winter?" "Not yet, but I still have this whole part to go through tomorrow," I said, pointing to some boxes in the far corner. "I know there's stuff in there I could throw away, and I still haven't quite finished organizing the rest. We'll have plenty of room when I'm done." "I'm impressed," Julie commented. "I have no idea. Did you start something for dinner?" I just looked at her, sweat running down my face. "Okay," she said with a laugh. "I'll start dinner. You need a shower." Truer words have never been spoken. I've been busy since 8:30 in the morning and didn't even stop for lunch. I took my time in the shower. While I was there, I hear Julie changing in the bedroom. I was hoping she would come in and wash my back, but no luck. She was cutting potatoes when I took the beer from the refrigerator. "Can I help?" "No. I think you've done enough work for today," she replied. "I have pork in the oven. Dinner won't be soon, so just go and rest." "Your wish is my law," I joked. I took my beer into the living room and settled into my rocking chair. Once she had the potatoes set to boil, Julie joined me with a glass of wine. "I know you already told me, but I forgot where you're playing this Friday." "At Plato's place on Oakton," I answered. "Why do you ask? Are you thinking about joining? You haven't been to the show for a long time." Actually, some of the girls in the office were talking about getting together for a bachelorette party. I thought maybe I'd show them that not only am I married to the best music teacher in the world, but also to someone who's damn good at guitar. "What time do you start?" she asked. "At 9 o'clock. "Oh, it's a little late. They'll probably want to start heading home by then. Maybe I can get the guys to start a little earlier. I don't think Manager Plato will have any objections to an extra half hour of free entertainment." "That would be great, honey. Can you play Guitar Man right away?" I laughed. It was truly great to have a wife who was so proud of her husband. Guitar Man is a song that certainly makes the guitarist stand out in the band. I always enjoyed hitting the house when we played it. "Well, I'll have to check with the guys and make sure they can get there early, but if that's no problem, yeah, we'll make it the 5th or 6th song of the first set." I needed some time to warm up before playing this one. A little later, during dinner, the thought of a computer came to my mind. "Hey, honey, I found your old Dell laptop in the garage. It doesn't work anymore. Can I throw it away?" "Oh, shit. I completely forgot about it." No, don't throw it away just yet. There are still a bunch of college photos in there. When it stopped working, someone told me they could still be saved. I forgot what was in there. Yes. But I know I have pictures of sorority girls and lots of us having fun together. Most of these girls I'll never see again, so I'd like to try to salvage the pictures if possible. I'll probably have to take him to one of those computer stores, I think. I was definitely not a computer genius, but I knew that retrieving things from a hard drive wasn't that hard. Bob Kramer, our computer science teacher, did this all the time when the computers at school failed. Julie's birthday was coming up in 6 weeks. I already had a nice pendant in installments and was expected to take her out to a nice dinner, but I could really surprise her with these photos and it wouldn't even cost me anything. I could imagine her face when she unpacked the small box with the flash drive. The next morning, after Julie left for work, I put the computer and charger in the trunk of my car, where they would remain until I met Bob when school started. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was done with the garage. It was a lot of work, but now I had enough space for both cars. I drove mine inside and closed the roll-up doors, knowing Julie would be amazed when she arrived. I took a shower and then started calling the other guys in the group to see if they could start early on Friday night. Once I received agreement from each of them, I called Plato's manager to make sure he didn't mind. It turned out to be a really fun night. Julie and her friends were already there when we started setting up. By 8:15, we had finished our sound checks, so the boys and I walked over to their table to say hello. Julie introduced everyone. One of the ladies said she expected a great performance from us because Julie had been bragging about us all night. I looked at my watch. Well, I guess we better get up there and see if we can live up to your expectations. I kissed Julie and headed up to the stage, while the rest of the guys went up to kiss their wives who were sitting at another table. We already had people on the dance floor by the time we started our second song. I noticed a couple of women from Julie's group dancing and looked towards their table just in time to see someone apparently asking my wife to dance. Julie loves to dance, and I have no problem with her dancing with other men when I'm on stage. It's rare that she agrees to slow dance. And when she does, there's always a fair distance between her and her partner. I was told by friends who sometimes came to the concert and sat with Julie that when she accepts an invitation to dance from a stranger, she warns them that her husband is a member of the group and will be watching, just in case the dancer has any ideas. I was a little sorry to ask the guys to start early because everyone in Julie's group was still there at 10 o'clock when we took our first break. One woman even called her husband and asked him to join them. They didn't start to break up until we were deep into our second set. Julie and another woman stayed at the table when we took our second break. I ordered a beer and joined them. Julie wasn't wrong when she bragged about you. You guys are really good. Thanks. Carol, right? The last of the group, Julie, nodded in confirmation with a smile. Aaron, the keyboard player, is also a music teacher. For the other guys, it's just a hobby, but everyone takes it seriously and tries their best. Well, it's noticeable, Carol replied. It's a shame I can't stay until the end of the show, but I have to go. It was really nice meeting you, Dane. Mutually, I said, standing up as she rose to leave. Honey, I'm going to join the table of wily ladies, but I probably won't stay all night. The other musicians' wives sat at a table right in front of the stage. Julie wasn't very fond of the couple of ladies. She said they liked to talk about other people, and not in a good way, hence the comment about the table of wily ladies. However, she was always sociable and sat at their table if she did not come with our friends. Okay, honey, we're going back to the stage. Wave to me when you leave and be careful on the road. I will, honey. Now get up there and show them what a band with a killer guitar player sounds like, she said, stealing a line from her favorite song. It was already after 2 in the morning when I returned home. I was excited and hoped that Julie would stay awake. But alas, she fell asleep on top of the blanket in her sexiest negligee. It was obvious that she had the same thoughts as me, but the late hour was a little too much for her. Starting a new school year is always a bittersweet experience. Sitting at my desk and looking around the various classes, some students I recognized, some I didn't. Some children I loved, and some I didn't. I always thought about last year's graduates, most of whom I would never see again, and wondered how they were doing now. Despite everything, I always tried my best to mentor and nurture their talents. To each of them, I tried to impart my knowledge of music and sometimes a little wisdom from life experience. I saw Tommy Benton raise his hand. This was his 3rd year in my class. He was a C student at best and unlikely to become a musician. However, I always thought he had a good chance of becoming a stand-up comedian. He was the class clown, and I knew we were going to start the year off with a laugh. Yes, Tommy? I had completely forgotten about Julie's computer until I saw Bob Kramer eating lunch in the staff room. I went to the refrigerator, took out my own lunch, poured myself a cup of coffee, and joined him. Hi, Bob. How was your summer? Hey, Dane. Not bad. Jan was able to take 3 weeks off this year, so we took the kids and went to a little lake in Michigan. We all had a great time. How about you? We exchanged stories about how we had spent the last 3 months before I approached my original question. Listen, Bob, my wife has an old Dell laptop that doesn't work anymore. I was going to throw it away, but there are a lot of photos in there that she wants to try to salvage. Would you mind taking a look at it? Of course, no problem. Do you have it with you? Yeah, it's in the trunk of my car. Okay, let's finish lunch and I'll go out there with you. I'll take it to my car and watch it for you tonight. The next day we didn't see each other until after school, and I was getting ready to go home when he called out to me from the hallway as I was leaving class. Dane, just a minute? I turned and saw him approaching. Certainly. I have the photos you wanted, he said, walking up to me. Follow me to my car and I'll give them to you. Everything was in his trunk. First, he handed me the flash drive. Here are all the pictures I could find. She scattered them all over the place. She had a few folders, but then she put a bunch in her email and even more in the Windows Shared Pictures folder. I think I found them all. In total, about 300. He then took out the hard drive. It came in a nice storage case. Here is her hard drive, he said, handing it to me. He's fine, so if she needs anything else, just let me know. The only thing left was the computer itself. Do you want the rest back? If not, I'd like to keep it. I can take it apart for parts. Yes, no problem. Leave him, I told him. Julie just wanted photos. I don't think she has any sentimental feelings about the case, I joked. Okay, thanks. I looked at some of the photos when I transferred them to the flash drive. Some of them are funny, he said. I thanked him again before we parted ways. On the way home, I thought about the flash drive. I've seen some that were really pretty with rhinestone hearts all over them. They can even be ordered engraved with the person's initials. The one Bob gave me was simple. I still had a month until Julie's birthday, so I thought I'd check Amazon and a couple other places to see what I could find. At least that was the plan. Julie picked a couple of romantic comedies on Netflix, and we snuggled on the couch until it was time for bed. I definitely wasn't going to miss out on another night of love, so the fancy flash drive would have to wait. The next day I saw Bob again and wondered if he knew where I could get a fancy flash drive. I stopped him in the corridor. I knew he had to go to class, but it was just a quick question. Hey, Bob. Hey, Dane, do you need anything else? I was just wondering if you knew where I could buy a fancy flash drive, something more suitable for a birthday gift. He laughed. You've come to the right place, my friend, but I need to go to class right now. Meet me after school. And with these words, he turned and continued down the corridor. I was still packing up at the end of the day when he walked into my classroom on his way out. So, you want to transfer these photos to a nicer flash drive? Hey, Bob. Yeah, something nice. Like I said, you've come to the right person. I have a friend who's a photographer. He has a studio on the North Coast. He's expensive as hell, but people don't care in those parts. He does good work, so he appoints accordingly. Prices, and people pay. Anyway, he does a lot of high-end boudoir photo shoots. Just the thought of it made Bob's mind wander and he laughed. Not such a bad job, huh? They pay him a lot of money to take pictures of gorgeous women in sexy lingerie. Of course, as he says, not all of them are gorgeous, but there are plenty of trophy wives in that area, many of whom were models in a past life. Well, he's the one to go to for fancy flash drives. He includes them in his boudoir photography packages. He can even do the engraving for you. The name of the studio is Hanson's Photography. It's in Wilmette. You can find a number online. His name is Carl. Call him and tell him what you want. Tell him you're my friend and that I recommended him to you. I'm sure you'll like what he has and he'll probably give you one at wholesale price. Bob, again, I owe you one. You're welcome, Dane. Always happy to help. I wrote down the name of the studio on a piece of paper before I forgot it and put it in my briefcase. I called him the next day at lunchtime and arranged to meet him at his studio on Saturday. Then I had to come up with a plausible excuse for Julie where I was going to go. It was almost an hour's drive one way from our house. I expected 2.5 hours there and back. I didn't like lying to her, but I knew she had already forgotten about the photos again, and I really wanted it to be a complete surprise. I finally told her I was going to the golf course to practice with a friend. Bob's studio turned out to be stunning, both inside and out. Carl met me at the door and invited me inside. The first thing I noticed was the large photographs he had hung on the walls of the outer office. Most of them were really beautiful portraits. Some I recognized as politicians and celebrities from the area, but he also had a few beautiful women dressed in expensive lingerie. Bob was right, I said, looking at one of the boudoir photographs. You have a job that most men could only dream of. He laughed. Yeah, I guess. Is this someone's wife? I asked, still looking. No, I would never post a boudoir photo of a client even with their permission. No, she is a professional model. She's a very beautiful woman, I commented. Yes, it is, he replied. Okay, you said on the phone that you were looking for a nice flash drive for your wife. Come with me and I'll show you what I have. He took me to another room, which he called the display room. He said this is a place where they bring clients to show them the photographs they have taken and sell all the related products included in the various service packages. He had left their albums that he could print with their photos and a variety of other items depending on how much the client was willing to spend. I started to get nervous. Everything looked very expensive. He took out all the flash drives he had. They were all laid out on black velvet. One immediately caught my attention. Damn, this is amazing! You have good taste, Dane. This is my dearest. What is the price? $2,000. At first, I'm not sure I understood him correctly. I paused for a second, trying to think what he could say, which sounded like $2,000. I couldn't think of anything. Did you say $2,000? That's what my clients pay for it, yes. It's plated in 24-karat gold, and those are real diamonds. I felt like I had made the trip in vain. Carl, I'm a high school music teacher. This is completely out of my price range. Sorry, I hope I didn't take up your time. He laughed again. I told you this is my dearest. Oh, yes, but I can tell just by looking at that. How much are you willing to spend? He asked, interrupting me. I'd be ashamed to say, Carl. I had to pay a $300 pendant in installments 2 months ago, and I still have $100 to pay on it. I didn't even realize flash drives like that existed. I was about to leave. Can you afford $17? Okay, from $2,000 to $17 was quite a jump. I assumed it would be something you could buy at Walmart, but I was pleasantly surprised when he showed it to me. This is what I give to regular portrait clients. I buy them 100 at a time. They're nickel-plated, and I have them in a shiny finish or a matte finish like this one. It was definitely nicer than anything I could buy at Walmart. There's a little shop a few blocks from here where they'll engrave your wife's name on it. The owner does a wonderful job. Say I sent you and he'll probably charge you about $10. He even gave me a cute little gift box for him. I thanked him endlessly and hurried to make the engraving. By the time I got home, almost 3.5 hours had passed. I thought Julie might be a little annoyed that I was gone so long on Saturday. She was just starting to prepare dinner when I entered. You either hit the ball so well that you didn't want to stop, or you hit the ball so bad that you didn't want to stop until you fixed your shot. I laughed. I don't want to talk about it, I said, letting her know it was the second option. I didn't want to lie to her any more than was necessary. Later that night, I grabbed a cup of coffee and retreated to our home office, telling Julie I had some review work to do. She rarely bothered me when I was there, so I was pretty confident that I would have plenty of time to transfer the photos from Bob's flash drive to the one I bought. I created a folder, inserted Bob's flash drive into the USB port, and began downloading. I didn't have a super powerful laptop, so it took a couple of minutes. My God, I thought, 532 files. I pulled out Bob's flash drive and plugged in another one. Damn, she was beautiful and Carl was right. That guy at the store did a beautiful job engraving Julie's name. I started downloading and waited. Once that was done, I didn't want to leave anything to chance, so I opened the USB drive to check that the photos loaded fine. I opened the file and briefly looked at the small thumbnails scrolling down to the bottom of the page. It looks like everything copied without problems. While scrolling, I noticed some pictures of Julie and I kissing, and I had a bright idea. I would print out the best one and frame it to give to her the day after her birthday. I slowly scrolled up the page, looking for pictures of us together. I found one where there was no doubt Julie was, but it didn't look like me sitting next to her. I clicked on it, and sure enough, it was Julie, sitting very close to some guy I didn't recognize. Other people are milling about in the background, and it appears to have been taken at a party. There was nothing incriminating in the picture, so I didn't think much of it and continued searching. I found one of us kissing, but we were both blurry, and I figured there had to be better pictures of the two of us, so I kept searching. I found another photo, but neither of our faces could be seen. All that could be seen was the back of my head and Julie's arm wrapped around my back. I knew it was us because she was wearing the bracelet I gave her the night we became a couple. I took a closer look at the small photographs, continuing to search for something suitable. There were lots of great shots of her and her sorority sisters. I smiled, knowing that this would be a real source of pleasure for her. I kept searching, occasionally clicking on one of the thumbnails, only to see that it wasn't worth printing. I noticed one, but wasn't sure what it was. It was taken from some distance. It looked like it could have been Julie and I, but I had to click on it to be sure. It was Julie, but it wasn't me with her. It was some other guy who hugged my wife while she leaned over and kissed his cheek. She had a drink in her left hand, with a bracelet clearly visible on her wrist. I started wondering who the hell this guy was and why wasn't I there. Again, this was obviously done at a party. I took a closer look at the guy when I noticed something else. I started another search, more important. I felt my blood pressure rise to the ceiling as I found what I was looking for. That shot I thought was of Julie and I kissing passionately wasn't us at all. I thought for a second. I've never owned a blue and white striped shirt. All 3 photos were of Julie and this guy, and they were all taken after we supposedly became an exclusive couple. I sat staring at the screen as a million questions flashed through my mind at once. Who is he? Where have I been? Were they just fooling around, pretending to kiss? I couldn't see if their lips were actually touching. Whose party were they at? I looked around for other familiar faces but found none. But the photos weren't that good back then either. Where the hell was I while this was happening? I scrolled all the way to the top of the page and clicked on Windows options, where I increased the size of the thumbnails to large icons and began to search more carefully. I found them together in a few more pictures. Judging by the clothes they were wearing, it looked like the pictures were taken on 4 different dates. I was nowhere to be found in these photographs, and I could not find the date on any of them. To stop my imagination from running wild with incredible thoughts, I decided to print out a photo of her kissing a guy on the cheek and ask her directly about it. And then I had second thoughts. Her birthday was so close, and no matter how accusatory they looked at first glance, these photos could be completely innocent. From the day we exchanged vows, she was a devoted wife and never gave me any reason to doubt her fidelity. I decided she deserved the benefit of the doubt, at least until her birthday. I was about to close the laptop lid when another idea struck me. Since the pictures were taken at different times and from different cameras, there was no logic to the order in which they appeared. They were literally scattered everywhere. Even the pictures of Julie with this guy were not grouped. I could reorganize the photos of her with this guy and place them at the top of the page, perhaps separated by 1 or 2 other photos. That way I could watch her reaction as soon as she started looking through them. I wanted to see her reaction. Would I see guilt, or would she pass them by indifferently, perhaps indicating that there was nothing between them? I've never been one to sit and think about things. No matter how big or small the problem was, I always felt it was better to face it. Sitting around thinking or worrying about things only made the situation worse. I knew how many questions in my head would plague me over the next few weeks, but I had to try not to let them affect my behavior at home and with Julie. I changed my plans a little. Her birthday was on Friday. I was going to give her a pendant with a card that evening. On Saturday, I took her to dinner and danced at Plato's place. And on Sunday, our parents came over with cake in the afternoon. Later, we all went to an early dinner together, and then my parents went home from the restaurant. I planned to give her the flash drive on Saturday night so she could show the photos to our parents the next day. I thought about making Julie feel awkward by asking her who she was kissing in the photo when everyone was gathered around the computer, but again, without evidence that anything was actually happening, I decided not to try to humiliate her this way. Instead, I decided to wait until we got home Sunday night before giving her the flash drive. Over the next 2 weeks, Julie asked once if everything was okay, so I guess I did a good job of hitting my suspicions. She was in seventh heaven and cried when I gave her the pendant. That night, I didn't have time to delve deeper into my thoughts. Julie attacked me in bed, and within 3 hours, I was in heaven. On Saturday, after dinner, we danced until 1 o'clock in the morning, and then it was another night of lovemaking. I'm glad I didn't embarrass Julie on Sunday when everyone was together. It's been a while since we all got together, and we really had a great time. I know our parents didn't want it to end, but Julie's parents had a 2-hour drive home, so we all said our goodbyes in the restaurant parking lot and went our separate ways. It was about 8:30 when Julie and I got home. Julie headed to the kitchen. "I'll make coffee, honey. Do you want me to make it for 2?" I only had 1 cup to counter the 2 glasses of wine I had at dinner, so it sounded like a good idea. "Yes, dear. Thank you," I replied. I had the last gift in my jacket pocket. To be honest, I wasn't sure if I should face her. I wondered if I should just give it to her and not say anything about the guy. Unfortunately, this would be contrary to my essence. The last 2 weeks have been excruciating. There was no chance that I could continue to live like this. I needed to know. She was making coffee with her back to me when I sat down and placed a small, brightly packaged box on the table. "I have another gift for you, dear. And I even know what it is," she said without turning around. "But honestly, darling, I don't know if I have the strength for it tonight." "No, honey," I replied with a laugh. "That's not what I'm talking about." She pressed the brew button and came to sit at the table with me. Only then did she see the small, brightly packaged box. "Oh, dear," she said, reaching for her. Quickly unpacking it, she lifted the lid. It was a beautiful flash drive with her name on it, but she didn't know what it was yet. She removed the cover. "Flash drive. Honey, this is great, thank you," she said with some uncertainty in her voice. "Wait," I said, standing up to grab my laptop. I placed it in front of her with the screen open. "Put it in." "That's usually what I tell you," she joked, inserting the drive. The scream was almost deafening as the sketches appeared on the screen. "These are photos from my old laptop," she shouted, jumping up excitedly and throwing her arms around my neck. She showered me with kisses and thanked me again before sitting back down to begin reliving her college days through the images. I sat down opposite her so I could see her face. When I reorganized the photos, I placed one of her and him sitting together near the end of the first row. 3 more of them were scattered along the second row, and the 2 where they kissed were in the third row. I watched her carefully and knew there would be trouble when Julie took a short, quick breath with an almost inaudible sob as she reached the end of the front row. Her eyes locked onto more miniatures like lasers. The last 2 pictures of them kissing made her cry. I felt a knot in my stomach. "Do you want to tell me about it?" It was a statement, not a question. "Who is he, and why are you kissing him while wearing the bracelet I gave you?" As far as I remember, it was supposed to symbolize our exclusivity. I saw her trying to hold back her tears. "Dane, oh God, how can I explain this? I knew you would be hurt. Are you telling me that you slept with him when we were supposed to be exclusive?" I could already hear the anger in my voice. I'm sure she could too. "No, not really. I had to be sure, honey. I was so afraid I needed to be sure. I didn't want to make the same mistake as my mother." I knew her mom was going through a divorce because Julie always called her mom Mom, but her stepdad's first name, Don. I assumed he was her stepfather. I never asked what happened, and it was never brought up in conversation. Perhaps now was a good time to find out. Can you explain? I found it difficult to remain polite. My real father left us when I was 7, she began sadly. Mom admitted that most of the blame was on her. She said that she was in love with another man, but my father proposed to her. She said that she could never love him the way she should have and always hoped that the other man would come and take her away. Of course, this never happened, and in the end, the father went to his secretary, so to speak. Anyway, he left us penniless. We struggled for years. She met Don when I was 12. He was good from the start, but Mom didn't want to rush things for 2 years for fear of making the same mistake twice. When she finally realized that she really loved Don, they discovered that my father never filed for divorce. Don gave her money to file for divorce, and they had to wait another 6 months. I sat there for a few minutes, thinking about what she said. A lot of it made sense, I guess, but she said her mother was in love with another man. So you were in love with the guy in the photo? I wasn't sure. I'd known him since I was a kid and been crazy about him since the 6th grade. I was sure I loved him then. We dated in high school and my heart skipped a beat every time I was with him. So what happened? You obviously broke up for a while. He moved. His dad got another job in St. Louis. He and his mom stayed until he graduated, but then joined him. I was devastated. It took me a few weeks to stop moping about him. He never called, and I had no way of contacting him, so I forced myself to forget about him. A few years later, I met you in my 3rd year at Northern and immediately fell in love. Then Tammy, an old high school friend, called me one night and told me she had met Chuck. She told me that he and his family had moved back to Chicago and that he was studying at Aurora University. It was only a half-hour drive from Northern. Plus, you and I were already together. It really hurt when he left. I knew I loved you, but I needed to make sure, Dane. I had to make sure that if you and I got married, I could love you the way you deserve to be loved and not have the ghost of Chuck hanging over our heads causing doubt. I didn't give her time to make up a story, so I believed what she told me, but I in no way condoned her actions. I should have known the whole story. It looks like you met him at least 4 or 5 times. Did you sleep with him every time? No. We had sex a few times in high school, but I never slept with him after that, she replied. It sounded illogical. Come on, you just told me that you have to make sure that I'm the one, that you don't love him any more than you love me. You're telling me you didn't consider sex a component of that little assessment. You mean you weren't curious to know how much he's learned since school? By this time, I felt myself beginning to lose my composure, and the tears that had started in Julie's eyes were now streaming down her face, accompanied by sobs. Honestly, Dane, she moaned between sobs, I didn't have sex with him. We were close to it, but I couldn't do it. Did you get close? How close? I asked angrily. That was the last time I saw him. He had a friend, I don't remember his name, but he and his girlfriend lived in a 2-bedroom apartment off campus. We went there to hang out. We drank a little, and I think it was clear that we would spend the night, although no one really discussed this with me. Chuck and I had already been to a few parties and kissed in his car a couple of times. Combined with our history together, I think he felt like sex was a foregone conclusion. Anyway, he put me to bed, but as soon as he started touching me, I said I couldn't go through with this and left. She cried. At that moment, I wasn't sure what I believed or didn't believe, but one thing still haunted me. Where the hell had I been all this time? Julie, you and I spent almost all our free time together. When did all this happen? Oh my God, she exclaimed and covered her face with her hands. Obviously, I haven't heard the worst yet. She raised her head and looked at me with red and swollen eyes. It was when you were teaching, she told me. I knew why she didn't want to answer my question. We were engaged by then, I exclaimed. You dated another man for 12 weeks after we got engaged? It was difficult for me to control my emotions. Where was your wedding ring? You don't wear it in any photos. I kept it in my purse when I was with him, she moaned, but not the whole time you were teaching. You had been gone for a couple of weeks when I got that call from Tammy. Then I struggled with myself for a couple more weeks, trying to decide whether to look for him or not. A fight that I clearly lost. I interjected angrily. She was still crying as she nodded her head in agreement. So how long did you see him? If it was less than 12 weeks while I was gone. Every now and then, 6 or 7 weeks, she admitted. Tammy gave me his number and I called him. We talked for about an hour, catching up. Then he said they were having a party on campus that Saturday and invited me. We had a good time together, but I felt so guilty that I told him I had to study for an important test and left early. He called me a few days later and invited me to another party the following weekend. That's where this photo came from. And another one too, right? The one where you're in a passionate embrace while he tries to shove his tongue down your throat, I quipped. She looked at me as if she didn't understand what I was talking about. I knew where the photo was on the page, so I turned the laptop and quickly found it. I clicked on it and turned the laptop towards her again. Julie covered her mouth and winced. Oh, Dane, I'm so sorry. If it was only on the second date, I'm sure it happened more than once, I stated. I'm not going to lie to you, Dane. Yes, it happened a few times. Yes, that and much more, I stated. She nodded again in agreement. I wasn't sure I believed she hadn't slept with him, so I nudged her a little, wondering if she'd spill the beans. How much more? We were making out, she admitted. We kissed, and a few times I let him put his hands where he shouldn't. So you let him touch you and maybe play with your breasts, but you're telling me he didn't have sex with you? Honestly, Dane, I told you the truth. By this point, my stomach was in knots, I had a massive headache, and every nerve in my body felt like it had been burned by a torch. I needed to get out of there. She was still crying when I stood up and walked out to my car. Driving in the countryside usually calms me down, so I headed northwest, the fastest route to rural roads and open spaces. Unfortunately, it didn't work. My brain was a kaleidoscope of images of Julie and this Chuck guy. I continued to come up with new questions and become more suspicious. Maybe I was the second choice, and she came back to me after he left her. She said he didn't call her after moving in, so maybe she realized he wasn't really that interested in her. Maybe she realized that he would never marry her, so I was her backup, and that bit about her walking out of bed and leaving him with unresolved sexual tension. How am I supposed to believe that? I stopped at a red light when it dawned on me. I looked around and had absolutely no idea where I was. I wasn't even sure I was still in Illinois. I may have been to Wisconsin or Iowa. I looked at my watch to see the time. Damn, it was almost 3 in the morning. I need to be in class in 5 hours. To hell with it, I told myself. I sat at the traffic light until it changed twice, until I took out my phone and left a message for the school secretary. Now what? I wondered. I saw several calls and messages from Julie asking if everything was okay. The last one was just 20 minutes ago, so obviously she wasn't sleeping either. Fine. All the stress caught up with me, and I was too tired to go home, so I headed in that direction but stopped at the first motel I found. I saw the address when I registered. I was in New Diggins, Wisconsin, wherever that was. I didn't know and I didn't care. I was so tired that I don't even remember laying down on the bed, but I must have laid down because that's where I woke up. I urgently needed to go to the toilet, so I stumbled out of bed and automatically walked in the wrong direction. When I finally opened my eyes and saw an unfamiliar wall in front of me, I stopped to get my bearings. That's when everything that happened started coming back to me. I found the bathroom door, relieved myself, and then jumped into the shower. I began to feel human again as my naked form headed back into the room and towards the disposable coffee maker. While it was brewing, I sat on the bed and checked the time on my phone. Damn, I whispered to myself. It was 10 minutes to 11. I only had 20 minutes left before checkout. I got dressed and tried to collect my thoughts while I sat drinking this terrible coffee. Some of my thoughts about shortcomings and doubts still lingered in my mind. How can I be sure that I was truly Julie's only choice and not the console prize? I walked out into the lobby and threw my room key at the front desk on my way out. The plan was to find a restaurant where I could eat and think while drinking a decent cup of coffee, but my phone rang as soon as I got to my car. I looked at the display and saw that it was my mother-in-law. I opened the car door and sat with one leg in and one outside as I answered. Hello, Mom. I heard the worry in her voice when she spoke. "Oh, thank God, are you okay? Julie's been trying to reach you all night. She hasn't slept a minute." "Yeah, we got into a little fight last night after you left. I got in the car and just drove around the neighborhood most of the night." I heard her sigh of relief. "I know she told me everything. It's all my fault, you know. I'm the one who drilled all this into her head. She was only 12 or 13 years old when I started lecturing her about being sure before you marry anyone." "Mom, I understand wanting to be sure before you marry someone, but going behind my back and literally dating another man for weeks after we got engaged goes beyond just wanting to be sure. It's cheating. Pure deception." I felt myself getting irritated again and tried to calm down. How can I trust her after this? How do I know that she didn't pursue a relationship with this guy behind my back? "Oh, Dane, you would know if you would stop and listen to your heart. I know you're angry, but please don't doubt Julie's love for you." "That's the problem, Mom. I doubt it. How do I know that this Chuck guy didn't dump Julie and I just wasn't her backup?" "Dane, did she ever give you the slightest hint that you were her second choice?" "Trust me, Dane, I speak from experience. If a woman thinks that she is content with second place, she cannot help but express it in one way or another. When I first married Julie's father, I thought that over time I would learn to love him, but after a while, I began to notice all his flaws, little insignificant things that became big things. I started to get annoyed with the man I married and told myself I could do better. I disrespected him, picked on him, and stalked him. For years he endured my abuse until I finally kicked him out of the house. Yeah, Julie told me he finally ran off with his secretary and left you guys with nothing." I heard her sigh again. "That's not what really happened, Dane. I wish it were so, because the truth is much worse. He left when he finally couldn't take it anymore. By then I had pretty much broken his spirit and self-confidence. He climbed into the bottle and stayed there. He ended up losing his job and most of his friends. He was still living with his mother when he died of liver failure. He was only 42 years old." Before continuing, I heard her son several times. "I felt like I killed him," she continued. "I cried myself to sleep every night for a couple of weeks after I found out he died like that. I felt so guilty." Around the same time, Julie started talking about Chuck. It was Chuck this and Chuck that. I liked him. That's when I started preaching to her almost every day. They were together for years, right up until high school. I was pretty sure they were already having sex by then, so I stepped up my preaching, but she just kept telling me she loved him. I never told Julie, but I was relieved when he moved out, that I thought it would give her a chance to meet other men, see what they were really like before falling in love. Then she met you, and I just knew she picked the right guy. I had heard parts of her mother's story before, but this was a revelation. "So, you lied to Julie about her dad being out with his secretary?" "Yes. I know I shouldn't have done it. But as soon as he left, I already felt guilty about the way I treated him. Julie is all I have left. I didn't want her to hate me, so I basically blamed her father for everything. I just couldn't risk losing her, too. I know what you must think of me after all this, Dane, but please don't judge me too harshly. I tried to correct my mistakes. I was a good wife to Dawn, and I tried my best to be a good mother to Julie. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have preached so hard about my insecurities about the man she married. I should have trusted her judgment more, and I know that lying to her about her father was wrong. One of these days I'll have to admit it, but I don't think now is the right time. She has enough on her plate right now." I agreed and told her I wouldn't say anything. On the way home, I thought about everything Julie's mom said. One thing in particular stood out. She asked if Julie had ever given me any indication that I was second best. The answer was a resounding no. In fact, until I found these photos, I considered myself one of the luckiest guys in the world. I had a wife who literally believed there was nothing I couldn't do if I wanted to, but she never pushed me to be more than I was. I loved teaching, and she knew it. Most of our friends are married, and sometimes I shudder at what some wives say to their husbands. The level of disrespect they have for their spouses is blatant, and the husband usually just sits back and accepts it. Julie has never disrespected me or put me in such an awkward position, either in public or in private for that matter. Julie was lying on the couch with her phone in her hand when I walked in. She opened her eyes and quickly sat up as soon as she heard the sound of the door. "Oh, God!" she exclaimed. "Can you at least let me know you're okay? I worried so much. I did not sleep all night. When you didn't come home, I called the school this morning to make sure you were okay. When they told me you were sick, I was furious. I called my mom and asked her to call you." "Yes, I talked to her before. I know she called me back and said you were okay. Have you eaten? Would you like some breakfast?" I almost had to smile. There she was, putting her anger aside to put my needs first again. "Everything is fine with me. On the way home, I stopped at a little greasy spoon. The coffee is fresh and only about an hour old," she told me. It sounded good. It seems the coffee I drank at breakfast sat on the heater all night. I said nothing as I walked through the living room and into the kitchen. I still had a lot on my mind and hadn't decided what I would do yet. I poured myself a cup and sat down at the kitchen table to think. A few minutes later, Julie came in and stood in the doorway. "I'm not sure if I told you last night or not, but I want to tell you how sorry I am. It seemed so important at the time. I had to be 110% sure it was you. Looking back, I should have known. You were head and shoulders above Chuck in every way. I had to see it without feeling like I had to give him a chance." "Well, your mother takes responsibility for the way she taught you to be confident," I replied. "That's no excuse for what I did, Dane. I had to see it for myself. I'm really sorry. I know how much it hurt you. I see it in your eyes. I'm really sorry." With these words, she turned and left the room. Looks like she went upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen with my thoughts. I have always considered myself a logical thinker. As a teacher, I could take even complex problems, break them down and explain them logically so that everyone understood. I needed to somehow turn off my emotions and turn on my brain. I had an idea. The laptop was still sitting on the kitchen table from last night. I expanded it and started searching, but the result was disappointingly empty. "Okay, I'll have to do this the hard way," I told myself. Aurora University was only 45 minutes away. I shouted that I would be back in a couple of hours and left. The first thing I needed to do was find out more about this character, Chuck. I didn't want to ask Julie his last name because I didn't want her to alert him in case they were still in contact. Although I couldn't find his class yearbook online, the university library probably had a copy. It took me a while, but I found it. His name was Charles Goodman, and he majored in business management. Okay, I had his last name and business interests. I was going to see if I could find him on Facebook, but I came up with a better idea. I'd try LinkedIn first. It was more focused on the business community, and most people posted their photos next to their profile. I thought the school password was required to log into the library computers, but I found it already online, not turned off. A couple of minutes later, he was with me. He worked for a computer programming company that sold specialized software to auto repair shops. I wrote down the company name and phone number before logging into Facebook. Now I had more information that I could use to differentiate him from the hundreds of other Charles Goodmans I knew I would find. I typed Aurora into the search bar next to his name and only got 2 results, but unfortunately neither of them were successful. One was too old and the other was too young. I expanded the search area and continued to come up empty. I did this for almost an hour and got nowhere. Well, I thought, I know who he worked for. I gave up searching on Facebook when I had a brainstorm. The very first guy I found was at the age where he could be Chuck's father. I sat back down and looked at him. Again. His information stated that he was married, but nothing more. I looked through his friends list and found Lisa Goodman. She looked about my age, so I clicked on her. Voila! It was Chuck's wife. There were several photos of her and him together. After some more digging, I discovered that they had a 3-year-old daughter. Outwardly, he looked like an ordinary, hard-working, happily married and family man. Unfortunately, I knew that looks can be deceiving. Somehow, I needed to check Julie's story and make sure they weren't still dating behind my back. When I got home, it was 7:30. I didn't see Julie, so I checked upstairs. Judging by the wet spot on the pillow, it looked like she had cried herself to sleep. I checked in the kitchen to see if she had prepared herself something to eat. When I saw the empty dishwasher, I ordered pizza for the two of us. Over the next few days, little was said other than Julie's apology. They walked without stopping. A week later, my thoughts and emotions were still all over the place. I loved my wife, and if I knew for sure that everything happened exactly as she said, I would probably be able to forgive her, but I could not get rid of my suspicions. I still had 3 important questions to answer before I could come to any conclusions. 3 questions that haunted me day and night. How could I be sure that she had not slept with him? How could I be sure I wouldn't become her second choice after he dumped her? And how could I be sure they weren't still dating? Confronting him will do no good. If I didn't completely believe Julie, I definitely wouldn't believe him. I finally came up with a plan, but first I needed to do some work. I called my auto mechanic, Hank. He had an excellent understanding of machines and assessed his work fairly. Julie's Hyundai was still under warranty, but my old Chevrolet came to his shop several times a year. He and his wife, Melanie, became friends. I called him during my lunch break. Hank's car! Hey, Hank, this is Dane Bryant. Hey, Dane, how can I help you? Hank, I need a favor. Oh, I charge double the hourly rate for my services, or triple the hourly rate if it's illegal, he said with a laugh. No, I laughed in response. Nothing illegal. Do you happen to know Chuck Goodman or a company called Service Solutions? I've heard about this company, but I don't know the guy you mentioned. Is he your friend? I'm not interested in any computer stuff, Dane. No, Hank. I'm not going to ask you to buy anything. Good, because I don't even have a computer in my office. Mel's brother handles my books. He's an accountant. No, I would never ask you to do something like that. No, it won't cost you a penny. He probably won't even call you, but if he does, I need you to tell him that I bought the store from you. What? He almost screamed. Who's going to call this Chuck? Why on earth should I say that you bought my store? He works at Service Solutions. I need an excuse to meet him, so I will tell him that I bought your store and want to talk about buying software. I explained. There was silence on the other end of the phone. But you don't actually want me to buy anything, right? Really? It's just an excuse to make an appointment. What are you going to do with him? You're not going to beat him up or anything, are you? No, nothing violent, Hank, I swear. I just need to ask him a few questions, but he doesn't know who I am. More silence. And then I heard him sigh. This all sounds very James Bond to me, but okay. I'll let Mel know too, in case she answers the phone. Are you sure you're not dragging me into any illegal conversations? I'm sure, Hank, thank you. He probably won't even call, but I just don't want to take the risk. Okay, just one thing. Since you are the new owner, I need a promotion. Yeah, that's right, I laughed. Do you remember me? The guy whose favorite phrase is, so much? Well, part of my plan was in place, but I still needed to make an appointment. I assumed they had a few vendors, so I wondered if I could invite Chuck. When I called and asked his name, I was immediately connected to his secretary. I was glad that everything went so smoothly. I gave myself a pseudonym and made up a story about how I lived somewhere else and was only in town for a couple of days. When I asked if Chuck and I could meet for lunch, she checked his schedule and gave me an appointment for the following Tuesday. First thing Monday morning, I told the school that I was taking the next day as a personal day off. So far, so good. I was nervous when I walked into the restaurant, but I had practiced my lines and knew them well. I recognized him as soon as I walked in, but I let the hostess lead me to his table. He stood up, we shook hands and introduced ourselves. Our waiter brought coffee with us and said he would be back in a couple of minutes. We both studied the menu before setting it down. As soon as he picked up his coffee, I told myself it was showtime and began to play my part. You'll have to excuse me if I seem a little nervous. A strange thing happened to me last night. He chuckled. This is Chicago. Weird is normal, he joked. What's happened? Well, I lived here when I was a teenager. I've been wanting to move back for a long time. Buying Hank's store gives me that opportunity. Anyway, last night I was at a hotel bar and ran into a woman I went to high school with. Believe me, I'm not usually a kiss and tell guy, but this was so weird. We started talking, and I found out that she was divorced, and so was I. One thing led to another, and it came with me to my room. At this moment, the waiter returned. We gave him orders and waited for him to leave. Chuck feigned interest, but I'm sure he was just trying to be polite, telling me to continue my story. Well, I won't go into detail, but I really thought we were going to have a great night together when she suddenly jumped out of bed and said she couldn't do it. Talk about deflating your ego, she could do it. I didn't get dressed fast enough. She was out the door before I knew it, and I have no idea what I did wrong. I held my breath, waiting to see if he would take the bait. He chuckled again. Her name wasn't Julie Connors, was it? He took it hook, line, and sinker. Connors is Julie's maiden name. Now I just needed to pump as much information out of him as possible. No. Why don't you tell me that the same thing happened to you? Yeah, he laughed. When I was in college. I had known Julie since high school, but we lost touch for a few years after graduation. Then, during my senior year of college, she called me out of the blue. We got back together and started dating again. She was going to another college, but it wasn't that far away, so we got together on the weekends. It was a little weird from the start. How so? Well, we didn't get out of bed until our senior year of high school. When she called, I decided we would pick up where we left off. Yes, I intervened. I would also think that it would be easy, especially since she called you. Exactly, he retorted. But we dated for a couple of months before I actually got her back in the sack, and then when it finally happened, she did what your girlfriend does. She jumped up and said it was a mistake and was gone before I even touched it. Suddenly, it felt like the weight of the world had just been lifted from my shoulders, but I was still looking for more. So you never managed to have sex with her in all this time? Like I said, we hooked up in high school, but not after we met again in college, no. Oh, we kissed in the car a few times. I took off her top, and my hand a couple of times was lower, but that was all. At this point, the waiter brought us dinner, which left me with one more important question. Did you ever see her again? No. I tried to call her, but she didn't answer. Then a few days later, she finally called me and apologized. Did she say why she jumped out of bed like that? I asked. Sort of, he replied. I think she had another boyfriend, and she cheated on him with me. And then she had a sudden moral attack. And you never saw her again, never got together at some little diner for one night? I asked, in my best Snidely Whiplash voice. No, she was also a special woman. I tried to call her back after she admitted that she was seeing someone else. I thought about starting a fight to see if I could get her back, but she had already blocked my number. I think she was serious about this guy. That was the last time I spoke to her. Shortly after that, I met Lisa, my wife. We have a fantastic daughter, and I'm very happy, so I guess that's it. It worked. And you? You said you're divorced? Have kids? By resorting to this little trick, I had not yet decided what I would do if I received the information I was looking for. Do I continue to lie at this point and just leave him blathering on about selling software, or do I tell the truth? If he was a jerk, I'm pretty sure I would have just continued the charade and just left him saying, I'll call you, don't call me. But he seemed like a stoic guy. I have a confession to make, but before I do, I want to let you know that this meal will be on me, even the tip. I'm not usually very good at reading people, but if anyone looked confused, it was him at that moment. I don't understand what... I'm not who I said I was, I said, cutting him off mid-sentence. My name is Dane. Julie is my wife. I saw his mouth open. I wasn't going to tell him anything other than my name, but I thought I owed him an explanation. So you're really not interested in our software? I'm afraid not. I just found out about Julie's little date with you in college. We were actually engaged at the time. She told me the whole story, but after keeping it a secret all these years, I wasn't sure. I couldn't trust her. I needed to make sure she was telling me the truth, so I came up with this little plan to see if I could get you to talk about it. And you found out what you wanted to know? He asked angrily. Yes, I did it. Your stories are almost identical. You can't even imagine how relieved I was. How do you know Julie and I didn't get together and compare stories? I knew he was angry and would try to attack me, but he had already given himself away. Because she has no idea I'm here or even that I know your last name. I can also tell by your anger, I said. It's authentic. Yeah, well, he said, cutting off a piece of chicken parmesan. I could use a sale. I guess I can't blame you. If my wife had told me such a story, I probably would have done the same. Did she tell you why? I have to admit, I've thought about this a few times over the years, and I still wonder what it all means. I mean, if she was so stubbornly head over heels in love with you, why did she even call me? If I tell you why and pay for lunch, do you consider us equal? I asked with a smile. He looked me straight in the eye as if I had a lot of nerves. Then I saw the smallest smile. Yes, of course, he said, nodding slightly. Why not? I told him the whole story about how Julie's mother persistently preached to her that she needed to be confident before committing to a relationship with a man, and how Julie didn't know he was back in Chicago until we were engaged. I apologized again for pretending and explained how I needed to make sure she chose me over him, and that I wasn't his second choice after he dumped her. He assured me again that everything happened exactly as he told me. He then thanked me, saying that the incident had always puzzled him, and although he had missed the sale, he was glad that he had finally been enlightened. When we left the restaurant, I had the impression that we could become good friends. Instead, we shook hands in the parking lot and said goodbye. On the way home, I still had a lot to think about. I thought again about the relationships some of my friends had with their wives, the arguments and disrespect that women sometimes showed towards their husbands. I especially remember one evening when Julie sat at the women's table during one of our performances. Linda, our drummer's wife, made a derogatory remark about the band, and Julie attacked her. She berated the woman on one side and the other to the point that Linda cried when she apologized to Julie and the rest of the girls. When it's all over, I can't think of another person I'd rather have in my corner than my wife. If the roles were reversed, I had no doubt that she would fight for me and our marriage with everything in her body. Did she deserve anything less from me? It was only about 2 o'clock when I returned home. I still had 3.5 hours before Julie got home. I called, then warmed up a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table to think. God knows why. But for some reason, I felt the need to take another look at the photos of Julie and Chuck. I opened the file on my laptop but couldn't find it. She deleted all the photos of them together. I thought it was interesting and wondered if she had done the same with the photos on her flash drive. I had a pretty good idea of where she would keep it and had no problem finding it in her jewelry box, just as I expected. I plugged it in and looked. Sure enough, they were all gone. All the other photos were still there, but none of Chuck was anywhere to be found. She wasn't even interested in keeping one as a keepsake. I got back in the car and stretched out in my chair, feeling damn good. Any suspicion of Julie's fidelity at that moment would have been pure paranoia. I had no doubt that I was her man and she was my woman. That thought brought the biggest smile to my face in a long time. When Julie walked in, she looked at me in my suit and immediately became worried. As stressful as things were, I couldn't blame her. "What's going on, Dane? Why are you wearing a suit?" "I have a date today," I told her. "And if she doesn't go upstairs and shower quickly, we'll be late." She just stood there for a second with a quizzical look on her face. "What?" "Hurry up," I said, interrupting her. "I'm inviting you to dinner." "What case?" "I'll tell you later. Now hurry up. We have 30 minutes to get out of here." I think she started to relax a little when she saw my lecherous grin as she came out of the shower, naked. "Are you sure you don't want to just stay home?" "No, we have a reserve, but keep that thought in mind for later," I replied with a smile. This day cost me dearly. By the time I had lunch with Chuck, the bill was almost $50 with drinks and tip. Dinner at Odette, in the city center, will cost more than twice as much. Julie was cutting into her Diane steak when I finally answered her question about why we were celebrating. "I had lunch with Chuck today," I mentioned casually. "With whom?" she asked, putting a piece of steak in her mouth. "Chuck Goodman." Julie gasped and choked on a piece of meat. For a second, I thought that I would have to give her artificial respiration, but she managed and drank a sip of wine. Our waiter noticed this and hurried to our table. "Is everything all right, madam?" he asked anxiously. Julie just nodded and drank more wine before answering in a hoarse voice. "Yeah, I just didn't swallow it right." She coughed a couple more times. "Are you sure you're okay?" I asked. She nodded again. Yeah, I'm fine, she said a little more clearly and looked at the waiter. Honestly, I'm fine. He seemed convinced and returned to his duties. Did I hear correctly? Did you have lunch with Chuck? How did you know where to find him? What did he say? Well, you may be glad to know that he confirmed your story. She continued to shake her head as questions swirled through her mind. I don't even think I told you his last name, did I? How could you possibly know how to find him? It doesn't matter. I found it. And just like that, he started talking about me? Not right away, but I figured out how to bring you up in conversation. All this time, the poor guy was wondering what he did wrong that night. Did he know who you were? Not until he told me everything I wanted to know. Then I told him the truth. She continued to look at me as if she didn't believe my words, so I decided to convince her. You didn't tell me he undressed you in the car several times. I saw her eyes widen, and I knew she was convinced. I knew you didn't believe me, she said angrily. Would you believe a story like that if it were me telling you? Yes, I would believe it. Listen, all these years you never told me about your little adventure after we got engaged. You kept it a secret from me until I accidentally discovered it. It wasn't fair, Julie. You left me and cheated on me with another man. I can understand your reasons, but that doesn't justify your actions. If you weren't honest then, how do I know you weren't honest now? I saw Julie's eyes begin to shine with tears, but I needed to convey to her the seriousness of the situation. There is something else. Something else. Yeah, one more thing I don't think you've even thought of. She didn't say a word, so I continued. How do I know you weren't going to go back to Chuck and leave me? Maybe Chuck already had someone special and he was the one who said he couldn't go on with this and left you. What if I was actually yours? Your backup, your rebound? You can't think like that, she said too loudly. People at nearby tables looked her way, so she lowered her voice. Dane, have I ever given you that impression? No, you didn't, but you can't blame me for considering the possibility. I saw tears rolling down her cheeks. Don't cry, darling. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm just trying to make you realize the gravity of the situation. This time it was me. I had to be sure. She took a white cloth from her lap and wiped her eyes. Please tell me you forgive me, Dane. I'm really sorry. I won't hurt you for anything in the world. I forgive you, Julie. I forgive you because I know that if I hadn't been able to get Chuck to talk, I would have wondered if I really was your first choice for the rest of your life. I forgive you because I know you felt the same way. You went behind my back to confirm what you thought you already knew, but needed to be sure. I did the same today. I saw just a hint of her beautiful smile. I wanted this to be a happy occasion, so dry your gorgeous eyes and smile for me. Enjoy your meal, knowing that I love you with every beat of my heart. In the meantime, you can think about ways to show me how much you love me back tonight. And she did it. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.